music, science. It's the Amoeba People podcast. Greetings and welcome to the Amoeba People podcast, the show where science and music collide. Collide's a bit extreme, of course. It's really more like science and music creating the ultimate fist bump, and this show is the subsequent undulating jellyfish motion that people make with their hands after a fist bump. My name is Ray Hedgepeth, the singer-guitarist of the unpardonably nerdy science rock band, the Amoeba People. And today we have a special guest who is going to inspire you like you have rarely been inspired. Some of you might be listening to this podcast because you like science, some because you like music, others because you like both. And some of you might be asking yourself in your best David Byrne impression, why am I listening to this podcast? How did I get here? No matter what your reason for listening, and we thank you immensely for doing so, believe me, it's impossible not to be inspired by our guest, paleontologist Billie Guerrero's story. I don't want to spoil it for you by telling her story, but just to give you a quick sense of what she endured on the road to becoming a paleontologist. As a child, she was in the foster care system, and by her late teens, she was homeless. The thought of college, let alone becoming a scientist, was the furthest thing from her mind. We're going to hear her story and how she overcame one of the most impossible situations imaginable to become the incredible scientist and human being that she is today. We're also going to break down our song, The Terrible Lizards, track by track. The Terrible Lizards, that's the theme song to this show, what you hear at the beginning, at the end of every episode. Now, I don't want to imply that the process of writing this song was something that could be as remotely inspiring as Billie Guerrero's story, but it does share one slight similarity in that it took us many, many years to write this song, and it had to overcome many musical obstacles to become what it is today. It just seemed to never quite get off the ground, or when it did, we didn't know how to land it. And when we finally decided we were going to be releasing an album called The Fossil Record, we knew we finally had to get this song done. So here we go. Let's get right into the genesis of The Terrible Lizards. Okay, since we're breaking down the terrible lizards on this episode today, I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring in a special guest, and here he is, Mr. Dustin Jordan of the Amoeba People.
Holy cow, man. Thanks for having me. It's a dream of mine to be on the show.
You're on this show all the time. What are you talking about?
Not in person, though.
Okay, well, maybe that's true. Because you are here musically constantly.
That's true.
And in a skit or,
a little bit, yeah.
But,
okay.
So I thought, let's bring him in. And if I'm not mistaken, you brought something with you, some audio?
I did, an old demo that both of us worked on many years ago.
Which you've kept hidden from me and like in a vault or something because...
This is true, yeah. It redefines the word terrible. But
it is the terrible lizards after all.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, let's give that a listen. Are we going to be embarrassed by this, do you think? Or
absolutely, we will, yes.
Even better.
At least I will be.
Okay, here we go.
It's likened to the bink bink from Vanilla Ice's classic Ice Ice Baby.
Well, but that piano part though is from Under Pressure. So,
that's true.
So we can't diss Queen. We can diss Vanilla Ice.
No,
on this
I'm
podcast,
just dissing Vanilla Ice. I love Queen.
So okay, so we that was quite fun listening to that because that part it did not make it into the final song. But if I remember right, we were kind of going back and forth on the verse for a long time, right?
We were, yeah. I came up with a bunch of different verse lines where it was coming from the perspective of different dinosaurs. And the guitar part in the beginning, which Ray helped craft, was kind of in the vein. Is it Van Morrison that does the day or Don McLean?
Oh, Don McLean. That's right. I forgot about that. Like I had this whole thing. To be honest with you, listeners out there, and to you, Dustin, I was listening a lot not to American Pie by Don McLean. I was actually listening to the Weird Al Star Wars version of American Pie,
as you should.
And this here Anakin guy, maybe Vader someday later. Now he's just a small fry. That was in my head for some reason. So I was like, 65 million years ago. You know, there's a long intro for American Pie. Yeah. So I was listening to that, and then I was also listening to a song by the Flaming Lips called, I think it's The Gash. And it has like what sounds like 100 voices at all different pitches. Just where is that gash in your head?
I know the one.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, Weird Al and Flaming Lips. That's a good combo for the Amoeba People. You know? And so I was thinking that we're gonna do this huge intro. But I think after that, when we were kind of demoing it, the song came out to like as long as American Pie. Yeah,
super long. Well, I seen a cool little tie-in with the two songs. The day the music died. And sort of the day the dinosaurs died.
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of cool symbolic thing, and we could make a goof out of it.
Right.
And so that was the direction. And then in comes the worst piano you've ever heard in your life, crafted by yours truly, and then it just turned to like create weird Sesame Street kind of bad.
But you know what? I think though this is like indicative of so many Amoeba People songs is we struggle with where to straddle the line. Because we want it to be fun. We want it to be funny. Yeah. We want it to be energetic, but we don't want to go to a place where it's too, I don't know.
There's a weird place where those two trajectories cross each other. And if it's off just a little bit in the wrong direction, it becomes too on the nose.
Yeah.
It's too silly. I always feel like the music should be cool no matter what we're talking about.
Right.
And I'm writing on a piano, totally different instrument than I play. I play drums in the band. Didn't even pop into my head at the time.
Now we're talking about the verse though, but when you get to the chorus, that idea came from the piano too.
There's some melody. Yeah, there's some melodies in there that actually worked out really cool. It was you that went back and did the valiant task of kind of scooping up the nonsense and throwing that in the garbage and saying, here's the new feel and direction. We're going to take the best elements from what was done before and utilize those, but give it a new life, a new feel to it.
So then we're at a place where we're like, okay, let's simplify, let's cut back, and I think one of the first things that came to me was this keyboard part. So let's play that real quick. So once we had that keyboard part in place, it kind of started giving the whole thing a little bit more of a direction, but we were still trying to figure out what to do lyrically in the verse, right?
Right. Yeah, you came up with kind of a nice groove that was driving, and it gave it energy,
So then we decided to do a track of electronic drums, and at first I think we thought this might just be, kind of for a demo just to get the ball rolling, but then we ended up keeping it. And then we decided to track live drums, and of course we ended up keeping both the live drums and the electronic drums. And now, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, man, thank God for electronic drums. If I stink it up real bad, it just totally works out.
Well, now we're going to put them all together.
Oh,
so,
geez.
Yeah, let's put the keyboard, the electronic drums, and the live drums together.
It's really putting my feet to the fire.
All right, now we're going to bring in the kind of altered, bizarre voices of the dinosaurs themselves as they sing along in the chorus.
We are the terrible lizards, wiped out by a post-asteroid blizzard. We are the terrible lizards, fossilized bones brought back together. Yeah.
Now, how fun is that, though? I mean, like, being an adult and being able to sing like a dinosaur, that's just too fun.
It was very liberating.
Yeah.
That's where that, like, Schoolhouse Rock, Sesame Street element can actually work. You
know what? We were talking before about that fine line to cross in an Amoeba People song. Like, where we want it to be of a certain quality, but we don't want it to sound too much. Mike McCraw, our friend Mike McCraw, the animator, Mike the Wolf, who we're collaborating with now on.
Love that guy.
He's fantastic.
Yeah, he is.
The Foil 4 cartoon, which we'll talk more about on a future podcast. But he had a good way of putting it once that I've kind of adapted, and that is Muppets is okay, but Muppet Babies, not okay.
Correct. That's very good, actually.
And for the Amoeba People, I think, like, yes, we can go Muppets, but if we go Muppet Babies, it doesn't work for us.
Yeah, so now we lose our credibility somehow as people that are legitimate.
As usual, we will put all the pieces together and hear the completed version of The Terrible Lizards at the end of this episode after my interview with paleontologist Billie Guerrero. But in the meantime, man, this has been so much fun.
Agreed. Thank you.
This has been a blast,
Totally.
And I don't know if you heard, but we have a brand new sponsor for this episode.
I have heard of that, actually. It's actually been sponsored by our old friend, Reginald Mulray.
Oh, Reggie.
We go way back with this guy,
Good
folks.
guy. Great guy. Fan of the Amoeba People. Friend of the Amoeba People. Yeah. He's
the very tip top.
And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, since I usually do like, now a word from our sponsor. You're here. Maybe you can say a word from our sponsor.
Ray, it would be my honor and privilege.
You go for it,
okay?
man.
I'm going to say this. Thank you for listening to the Amoeba People podcast. And now, a word from our sponsor.
That was beautiful.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Car wrecks. Motorcycle wrecks. Any kind of wrecks. Call T-Rex. T-Rex Collision Centers.
Oh no, my copper-lytic converter went out. Now my car won't start.
T-Rex also offers roadside assistance.
Oh, bodacious.
No, little buddy, more like Cretaceous. When you choose T-Rex, you and your vehicle will be soaring down the highway again in no time.
Dude, that's kind of a lame pun.
Easy there, buddy. I'm just trying
Actually, your whole company name's kind of a lame pun.
Oh, another satisfying customer. T-Rex Collision Center, serving Western North America for 67 million years.
If you heard our last episode, Fossil Hunting with Gabe Santos, you heard me mention the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology, where Gabe is collections manager. Well, I was able to interview a number of paleontologists about a number of different topics over the course of 2 separate visits to the museum. My interview with Billie Guerrero took place in another one of these amazing classrooms they have at the Alf. And this time, there was a Parasaurolophus fossil right on the table in front of us. It was the complete skull of a juvenile, if I'm remembering this correctly. And it was just amazing to see. These were the completely awesome circumstances under which my interview with Billie took place. In case you can't tell, I'm in love with the Raymond Alf Museum and their incredibly awesome staff. You'll fall in love with them too, and if you don't believe me, just check out their Instagram feed. They know how to make a workplace fun and creative, and they understand how to maintain a balance between hardcore science and a healthy sense of humor. So, without further ado, here's my interview with paleontologist Billie Guerrero. But let's go way back. Let's start like way back at the beginning.
Yep.
Let's go to little Billie and tell us about little Billie growing up.
Well, honestly, this museum is often referred to as like the hidden gem of Claremont or in the SoCal area. So I'm really glad that you're here to give us a little recognition. When I was younger, I unfortunately didn't get to focus on my studies or education. It's in retrospect, I'm kind of like blown away that that's academia is my life now. Because, you know, I did grow up in a very chaotic home, and we moved around a lot. And so when I think about grade school, it's very absent. It was pretty much I got enrolled and then it was time to leave. And then when I was about 12 years old, I entered the foster care system. So when I entered the foster care system, my education was disrupted even more. So my focus was not on education. It was more like, where am I going to be next? Yeah. Where's my next meal coming from, and things like that. So you mostly hear from younger or from paleontologists that in their younger years, they went to a museum or they saw some kind of dinosaur and then they got interested in paleontology and they've been passionate ever since. For me, it's different. I did not even know what paleontology was until I entered college, and that wasn't until I was older. I was about 23 when I entered college. So when I aged out of the foster care system, I also faced homelessness because that's what many foster youth go through. So when I was homeless for a while, and then when I had my first child at 19, and I have 2 children now, it was pretty much like, what am I going to do with my life, and what am I interested in? And even though I wasn't interested in paleontology at a very young age, I was very interested in science. I was always in science classes. I would get just very fascinated with the material no matter what it was. I remember one of the schools that I went to, which was a continuation school, when you get into the system, and sometimes that's an option to make up credits. So I went to this school, and I remember there was a few science teachers that would challenge us, because the foster care system and continuation schools tends to have a culture of low expectations. So they don't expect much from you, so they don't give you too much work. They basically are just babysitters for the day, typically. But, every now and then you run across a faculty member or a staff that really is in the job for a purpose. They feel like they have a purpose, and I came across a few of those, and 2 of them were science teachers. And I remember just eating up the material, and I remember trying to memorize everything about the solar system. I was first into the solar system and how distant the planets are from each other, what makes up planets, and things like that. So science has always been an interest of mine. I was also raised in a very religious household, and I was very religious when I was younger. And so that also kept me from, kind of feeling bad that science conflicted with my religious viewpoints. Not that it conflicts with religion, it's just that with my particular religious viewpoints, it conflicted. So there was a lot of struggle. But like I said, when I exited the foster care system and I had my first child, I revisited everything. And I went to a lecture, actually. And this lecture was on creationism versus evolution. And my mom, actually, who's here and there, when she found out that I was no longer religious, she basically was wanting me to be religious again. So she gave me the flyer to this debate at Chaffey College in Rancho Cucamonga. So I went to it, not enrolled in college just yet, did not even think college was for me. I thought college was for smart people. And at the time, at 23, I had so much education in my background. I took an assessment test, and the assessment test placed me at 7th grade reading and math at 23. Wow. So I was I'm not college material. But I went to this lecture, and I remember it was a physical anthropologist arguing for evolution, and I was I have to go back to college. I have to go to college. I have to be in school. This is amazing, and I want to do what that guy does. But it all started there with going to that lecture. And I enrolled in college the next semester, even though I did not have any clue what I was doing. I enrolled into 4 classes so it was full time. One of the first classes was contemporary philosophy, which just blew my mind. And I have a pretty strong philosophy background, because after that class I took a lot of philosophy classes. Which really helps, in the scientific world too, because science starts with the philosophy,
right.
Yeah.
So the big questions.
Yeah,
it's all
the
about
questions.
Exploring
Yeah.
those, why is this happening? Why did it happen?
Exactly.
When will it happen again?
Right. Yeah. So My first semester, even though I came in with the 7th grade reading and math level, I really, really pushed to get the understanding of the materials that was being taught in class, because it was, the contemporary philosophy was a really hard class, but I had other classes that were like fundamentals, like English and things like that. And I just remember staying up all night reading like the Allegory of the Cave and Plato and what was he about, and Kant and then my first semester I actually made Dean's List. So it was really like that really like made me believe that I could continue my education. And I'm 31 now, so that started when I was 23. And like academia has been my life since. And I have ran plenty of clubs. I was president of the Club of Secular Understanding for 4 years at Chaffey College. And then I was also president of the Anthropology Honors Society at my university. And I also graduated as a commencement speaker with University Honors recently. So, and now I'm doing a master's in geology.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
By the way. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. In Cal State San Bernardino, I'm doing a geology master's program now. So, and then I still, even though I enrolled as an anthropology major, and I finished actually with my bachelor's of science in anthropology, because there's not many undergrad paleontology programs, and I wasn't going down the path of paleontology till later, when I was already well into my anthropology career, academic career. So one of my last classes at Chaffey College was a historical geology class. And when I was really having trouble finding something I'm really good at. Like, I liked anthropology, but it was really the paleo part of anthropology that I liked. I just didn't realize that. Everything else, like the cultural and the linguistics, and it's like, okay, those are cool, but it's like not really what I want to do. So when I went to this historical geology class, it went over dinosaurs and it went over rock identification, mineral identification. I was so engulfed by it. We read Your Inner Fish, and Tiktaalik has been my favorite fossil ever since. And so Your Inner Fish, and with that class, it just really made it that much more like, okay, this is what I want to do, paleontology.
She mentions the book Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin, and I'll admit it, I actually have not read that book, but I have seen the documentary based on that book, and it's fantastic. And in fact, I'm pretty sure you can go to pbs.org and watch the entire series. All the episodes are up, and you can see them all. It's fantastic. But, buy the book too, people. Come on. But then watch the documentary. Do you remember the professor in that
Jane
class?
Warger. And she has been the biggest mentor ever. So Jane Warger is the head of the Earth Science Department at Chaffey College, and she actually introduced me to this museum. So we went here as a field trip. And she took us to the San Andreas Fault, the ancient San Andreas Fault, but also the current San Andreas Fault. We went to Mount Baldy for that. We went here for a field trip, Natural History Museum for a field trip, and I was just eating everything up. I was like, when I came to this museum and I realized how closer it was to me, I was like, I have to come back to this museum. And I did. I came back as a volunteer at first. And so I volunteered for maybe a couple months. And then I got accepted to a fully funded field school called Kubifora Field School, which is in Kenya. It's in the Great Rift Valley, so the cradle of humanity. Yeah. And it was fully funded. So I was given a living stipend. So it was research my first research project that I got to do. I was out in Kenya for 6 weeks doing that, and it was one of the most amazing experiences. I bet. And I told them that I was interested in paleontology, and that anthropology will always be near to my heart, but paleontology is what my interests are. So they gave me a paleontology project, and I got to do paleoecology and reconstruct an environmental setting between 2 to 1.8 million years, using animals that were specifically adapted to a certain environment. These animals are called bovids, and I love bovids. Bovids are true horned animals, not to be confused with antlers. So we have our antlers that are bone, and then we have our horns that are bone with a layer of like keratin over it. So yeah, these true horned animals, bovids, they have tribes, a lot of different tribes, and these tribes, you could identify them by their teeth. Their teeth have a different morphology, which is a fancy word for shape, and so when we see the morphology of the chewing surface, the occlusal surface of the tooth, we could say it's this bovid or that bovid or this bovid. And these bovids are specifically adapted to certain environments. So, for example, we have reduncines, and reduncines we never see them around away from water. So if we find a bunch of reduncine teeth in an area where there's no water, then we can say, well, there was once water here. So that's what we did, is we collected teeth. All over the formation, Kubifora Formation, and then we also used already established data sets to look at 2 other formations around the lake that we were by, which is Lake Turkana, which is a very famous site for anthropologists. Louis Leakey has a lot of setups out there, lots of research going on in that foundation. So yeah, once I got that project and I got to present it at my first ever conference, the American Association of Physical Anthropologists, I then knew okay, I could do science. This is something I could do, because I never seen myself as someone that's had a mind to do science. So being able to actually do science, it was just amazing,
The title of this episode is So You Want to Be a Paleontologist? Because listening to Billie Guerrero's story, I was reminded of how many times I've heard versions of the I never thought I could be a scientist story from other established scientists. They weren't good enough in school, or they couldn't focus, or they weren't at the top of their class, and yet these people found their calling anyway. For me, when I was a kid, I just assumed that I wasn't a science person. And that's probably because the way it's been taught in schools, that science is a subject. It's something separate from the rest of your daily experience. But what these amazing scientists have gone through on the road to discovering their love for science is that the problem is that science isn't a subject, and you don't have to be a science person to develop a love for it. By placing these strict definitions and restrictions on what science is, we lower the probability of people feeling like science is something for them. And the truth is, being alive means we encounter the beauty of science every moment of our lives. It's our way of trying to understand the universe, and everybody can relate to that. Yet sometimes we make young people feel like understanding the universe is for other people. It's not. It's for everyone. And I'm sure there are some genius scientists out there, of course, the Isaac Newtons of this world, who think science is only for them, or someone with their level of intelligence. But honestly, that has not been my experience meeting scientists. They seem to intuitively understand that everyone has the same desire to know the world around us, to ask questions about our existence and why we're here. And the scientists that I have met want to show the people that they meet on a daily basis that they can understand it too. How in the world did you do this? This is...
I put my mind to it. It's when I see something that I want to do or what I want, I really try to go after that. And so for being a paleontologist, I didn't think it would happen so fast, because I was in 2014 that I got into paleontology, and I still have trouble saying I'm a paleontologist sometimes, because it's so surreal to me. I'm just I can't believe I could say that, Right. So and unfortunately, I know a lot of kids, or they're not kids anymore, but kids that I used to know in the system who are my friends on Facebook or on Instagram, and they did not go down a good path. Some of them are, they have struggles with substance abuse or homelessness still, or, they had kids that were taken away. I don't have any success stories that I personally know. Not that there isn't, because there is success stories,
right.
But personally,
starting with your own.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't know anybody who was in the system that I knew that has a success story. And sometimes I'll message them and I'll say, hey, how's things going? And have you ever thought about going back to college? And not that college is for everybody, right. But they will say something similar. They will say, I'm not smart enough to go to college. My best friend, who I knew in the system, she tells me that all the time. She says, I'm not college material. And I'm like, I didn't think I was college material. She's like, yeah, but you're smart. And I'm like, no, like, I was like, okay, like, yes, I've got to that point, but it took a long time to get to that point. And I still have a lot of learning deficiencies where I have to reread things several times, or if, I have to spend more time on material. Like when I took human osteology and I had to memorize every single bone and all the little divots in the bone. And that was, I spent like 3 hours in the lab, like looking at bones and trying to figure it out, when there were students in my class who got it just, very quickly. And so it's hard, to go through academia and to have those learning discrepancies. But I always tell, the people that I talk to that feel that way, it's like, it just requires work. It's just going to require some work and time, and that's okay. Like, I still, the more I get into paleontology, the more I realize there's a lot of things I don't know. There's and that, and when I talk to other, paleontologists who are at PhD levels and they have all this information and they're really, really smart, and like, I try not to compare myself to them because I'm at the master's phase now and I'm not there yet, and I don't have all those years of experience, and so that's okay. I'm at a different level, and it used to affect me where I'm like, I could never be like that smart as that scientist, but it just, they went through the work too. And so yeah, and I've gotten people who told me, oh, you're doing paleontology, like, what's the money in that? Like, you're not going to have any money if you're a paleontologist. And I'm like, well, I haven't had much money living so far, so I think I'll be okay doing something that I'm passionate about, and as long as I could be comfortable, I'm fine. I don't expect to, be a paleontologist and then all of a sudden I'm like rich, I expect to just do something I'm passionate about, be comfortable, and leave some kind of legacy behind from that. Like, help people who are in my situation to be confident that they can do something that they love too. Something that might seem impossible. Because if you would have told 15-year-old me that I would actually be a scientist one day, I would be like, yeah, right, okay, me, a scientist, sure. So yeah, it's not impossible. It just requires more work, for some people, and that's okay.
So toward the end of the interview, I asked Billie about what it was like to have had so many people in the scientific community reach out to her and help her and encourage her, and if that compelled her to reach out to others the way the scientific community reached out to her. And her response was that communicating science has become one of her biggest passions. She loves getting the chance to show kids and young people that you don't have to look like Sam Neill or Laura Dern in Jurassic Park to be a paleontologist. And if you visit Billie's Instagram page, you'll see that she's got a super cool goth vibe going. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if she had been at my junior high in the late 80s, I'm pretty sure she'd be wearing a Bauhaus t-shirt and arguing with friends at lunch whether Peter Murphy's solo record was superior to Love and Rockets, or maybe, just maybe, jumping in with her thick black combat boots to argue whether or not the Bubblemen were really Love and Rockets in disguise. If what I'm saying makes no sense to you, hey, at least you have Google. We didn't have Google back then, okay? We just had to wonder, were the Bubblemen really Love and Rockets in disguise? Okay, I completely digress. But you kids are so lucky.
It's always fun to be here, and I've been given so many opportunities being here with my research project and with, I do tours. I love to talk to the public about science. It's one thing to do science, it's another thing to communicate your science, and I've gotten the opportunity to really work on communicating science to the general public, which is something I'm really passionate about, is science communication. Yeah. So, because if we just proliferate the knowledge among scientists, it's not doing anything. It should be getting out to the general public. Yeah. And it makes scientists more approachable. A lot of the visitors sometimes can't believe I'm a scientist. So when I'm here and I'm doing a tour, or I'm just opening the museum, and I'm here just handling money for the admissions, and they'll say like, oh, is there any paleontologists available to talk to? I'm like, I'm a paleontologist. And they're like, oh, you're a paleontologist? Sometimes they'll say, you don't look like a paleontologist. and I'll just be like, oh.
So tell me what a paleontologist
What does a
looks
paleontologist look like? I'm curious as to what you think about when you think paleontologist. So yeah, it's pretty.
What do they tend to say? Do they? Is it because of Jurassic Park? Do they think of Sam Neill or something?
Yeah, the same kind of idea of what a scientist is supposed to look like is either a older white male who goes around in cargo pants and some kind of fancy sun hat, or a white woman sometimes is more believable. But for me, someone who is pretty high maintenance, and I do like to do my nails and do my makeup and do my hair, and I do like dressing up.
Once again, that is science reaching you right where you are. So you want to be a paleontologist? You don't need cargo pants, although I am guessing they'd come in handy. You don't need a fancy wide-brimmed hat, though you probably do want to protect against ultraviolet radiation. All you need is the passion to be a scientist. And whoever you are, however you dress, whatever your background, it's the passion and the love of discovery that will propel you forward. So a huge thanks to Billie Guerrero for being herself and sharing her incredible story of triumph with us. After hearing her incredible journey from the foster care system to homelessness to college, then paleontology, I almost felt bad asking if she would introduce our song, The Terrible Lizards, but the Amoeba People are shameless.
Hi, I'm paleontologist Billie Guerrero, and this is The Terrible Lizards by the Amoeba People.
Archaeopteryx, Giraffatitan, Seismosaurus, Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Megalosaurus, Dilophosaurus, Plateosaurus, Cetiosaurus, Patagosaurus, Saltibus, Argonauts, Hypsilophodon.
The terrible lizards wiped out by a post-asteroid blizzard. We are the terrible lizards, fossilized bones put back together.
Supersaurus, Triceratops, Velociraptor, Gallimimus, Ankylosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, Gilmorosaurus, Gracioceratops, Lambeosaurus, Dromaeosaurus, Baronix, Dracorex, Minmikaguru.
The terrible lizards wiped out by a post-asteroid blizzard. We are the terrible lizards, fossilized bones put back together.
Amygdalodon, Apatosaurus, Bambiraptor, Irritator, Protoceratops, Gargoylosaurus, Harpymimus, Allosaurus, Gigantosaurus, Teolingosaurus.
We are the terrible lizards, wiped out by a post-asteroid blizzard. We are the terrible lizards, fossilized bones put back together.
Thank you so much for listening to the Amoeba People podcast. Ordinarily we end the show with the Terrible Lizards, but since we just listened to the Terrible Lizards in its entirety, let's get loungy. Thank you so much to my guest, Billie Guerrero, and everyone at the Raymond Alf Museum of Paleontology. Get on out to Claremont, California, and visit them. If you like this podcast and you want to support it, the best way you can do that is to rate it on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. That helps other people find out about it, and please don't forget to leave a corny science joke in your review. You can also help us out by contributing to our Patreon page, and thank you so much to those of you who already have. A huge thanks to my bandmates Dustin Jordan and Ryan Mosley for being 2/3 of the most fun band I've ever played in my life. And here's to all of you future paleontologists out there. Onward!